The difference between you and an Eternus 6 player is not some special strategy or cookie-cutter plan. It's that they understand and implement more of the ideas in this video than you do. Anything you can take away from this video will help you bridge that gap. This is the most comprehensive laning guide ever made for Deadlock. It is longer than previous guides you may have seen because it contains more information. I am drawing from almost 2 years of experience playing Deadlock as a top 50 player, so this video is dense. Please consider using the timestamps as a guide to find everything you're looking for. Let's begin. This video is primarily about how to win the lane phase in Deadlock, so of course it should be understood what the purpose of that even is. I think the primary goal of every player in the lane phase should be to secure a soul advantage. The soul advantage is what allows you to consistently and predictably win fights over the map's objectives. And of course, the longer the game goes on, the more relevant the objectives become. Things like the mid-boss, things like the walkers being easier to destroy after 15 minutes. Both of those things are what ultimately let you win the game, and so getting a soul advantage early sets you up for that. If I had the choice between a strong soul advantage or taking the Guardian early, I would actually err on the side of the soul advantage, as that would be the thing that lets me take not just that Guardian later, but other Guardians and other objectives in the near future. Don't forget, you're ultimately preparing for the mid-game. That means you don't want to make decisions that, though they may help you in the short term, actually hurt your mid-game. We'll discuss this more later. I want to focus now on the most basic things you should be doing practically 100% of the time in your lane phases. These are habits that are good to do in every elo, and I promise you, Eternus 6 players, even if they don't look like they're doing them, are doing them. Beginning with the big four: checking health, items, souls, and ults. These four things form the basis of making good decisions about when and how to fight in Deadlock. There's two ways to win a fight in Deadlock. There's just being better mechanically and fighting better. That improves naturally over time for most players, though there are particular techniques to employ in Deadlock to fight better. But there's also just fighting smarter. That's maybe taking a fight where you know you have the advantage, but your opponents don't know that. If you want to start taking smart fights in Deadlock, you need to be constantly assessing these four things. It can be obvious when your opponents are maybe low HP and you're high HP that maybe it's a good time to fight them, but the other ways are more subtle. Perhaps you're healthier than they are, but they have spent all of their souls in the shop, whereas you're sitting on 2,000 souls during the lane phase. In that case, though it may look that you are stronger than them, at least because you're healthier, perhaps they're actually much more effective than you in the fight. That's important to understand. Maybe you and your partner in lane phase are both doing high gun damage as your primary source of damage. It might feel like you're winning the fight, or that you would win a future fight because you're healthier than your opponents, but what if they've both bought Battle Vest? You might be gravely mistaken in that case, and you should be aware of those things before fighting. Souls are important as well. Perhaps you have more health than your opponents, but they each have 1,000 more souls than you. It's not then guaranteed that if you go try to take an aggressive fight with them that you'll actually beat them, especially if you're at the middle part of the laning phase, where perhaps they're hitting these ability upgrade Powerspikes. Many characters in Deadlock see a significant increase in the effectiveness of their abilities once they put 2 points into them. If you're fighting down souls, it might be the difference between you having your key upgrade and not, and maybe your opponent does and you don't. In that case, you could take a fight that may look good at just first glance, looking at maybe even health bars, but is actually significantly favored for your opponents. I also cannot overstate how important ult economy is to making good decisions about fighting. Many characters in Deadlock are balanced entirely around how strong their ultimate is. You can imagine a character like Dynamo. His ultimate is around a 4-minute long cooldown because it's so powerful. A character like that, if he has his ult, is going to be strong, but if he doesn't, he's going to be comparatively weaker. Even if you've been losing a lane phase, and you're down souls, maybe you're down a little bit of health, you're pressured under tower, if you and your partner both have your ultimates and the enemies don't, you have a very significant chance of winning that fight anyway if you use your ultimates correctly and decisively. Of course, this works both ways. Perhaps you and your teammate have been decisively winning the laning phase so far, and you're trying to pressure the enemy Guardian now to destroy it and really properly actually win the lane phase. But you fail to recognize that your opponents both have their ultimates and you don't. And so even though you're up items, you're up souls, you have the wave crash into the enemy Guardian, you both die. These things are extremely predictable if you make a constant habit out of thinking about them. When you get into the habit of fighting with your brain turned off, without respecting items, souls, ults, and health, you will consistently make poor decisions about fighting. And no matter how mechanically talented you are, that is going to negatively affect your performance. Moving on to mechanical decisions now. It should be a general habit that you prioritize clearing the wave before fighting players. If you don't prioritize the wave, you will consistently find yourself fighting the enemy heroes and their minion wave at the same time, because if they're killing your minions, their minions will have no choice but to run forward and target you. This also lets your opponents control more space. If the wave is being constantly pushed up to your Guardian, you, since you need the souls to become strong, have to clear the wave. So you now become anchored to the position of the enemy wave. And so when that wave is at your tower, the only zone you really practically control is your tower. So don't let that happen. Be the one to push the wave first before fighting. That gives you control of the center line of the lane, giving you access to high ground, to the bridge. When camps and boxes are up, that lets you move first to be able to secure the camp or take boxes, because the enemies will be delayed in doing that because they have to kill the wave first or else risk losing it, which would be terrible for them. When you are having the wave shoved out, it creates win-win situations for you. And as such, your default every single wave should be to clear the wave first. If you're not doing that, you should have a very good specific reason to do so. Another thing you should always be doing is playing around cover and the veil. If you're a close range character, it's more important for you to play around the veil. You can imagine characters like Billy, characters like Abrams that really enjoy close quarters combat. They are very good at contesting that middle ground veil. But every character, though, whenever possible, when clearing the wave or fighting opponents, should be playing around cover. Most characters in the game hold their gun from the right side of their character model, which means if you peek around cover from the right side, you can actively shoot minions and players while nearly being completely behind cover. And if you're doing that consistently, every single wave, and your opponents aren't, you are going to be compounding hundreds of chip damage over the course of the lane phase against them. That is going to benefit you immensely. One thing you'll see throughout these clips, but especially in the one you're about to see, is that high-level players consistently use certain evasive techniques, such as using heavy melees for quick lunges, typically also to evade around corners, sliding after dashing to conserve forward momentum to move across the map faster, as well as random wall bounces to get quick erratic movement without actually costing any stamina. Something else you must make a habit, no matter what kind of character you play, is sliding as much as possible in order to save ammo in your magazine. Every single character in Deadlock, when they fire their weapon while sliding, they do not expend ammo. And so when you're taking all-ins against enemy players, every bullet counts very often. And so sliding efficiently, even using dashes just so that you can slide afterward to save ammo, can oftentimes be the difference between killing or dying. If you're playing a character with a strong poking ability, such as Lady Geist's Essence Bomb, then consider using this poking ability intentionally when you know the enemies are about to try to secure one of their souls. The securer of the soul always has the advantage, which means if you shoot a soul as soon as it spawns, but the enemy did as well, they're actually going to get the secure. So it's very hard to deny souls that you know other players are looking at. But what you can do to take advantage of this predictability is use your otherwise and be easily dodgeable poking abilities when they're going to secure it. So When you see a minion die in front of you, maybe consider, instead of trying to go for a secure when it's very unlikely, take that opportunity to immediately put the pressure on the opponent going for the secure. The last and perhaps most important point I want to emphasize is playing around your power spikes. That was the whole reason I brought up the big 4 things to check for in the first place. Assessing health, items, souls, and ults is what lets you determine if you have a window where you have the advantage. That's typically when you want to be fighting. You don't want to be habitually fighting when you don't have a reason to think that you are likely to win. Take this example here. I've spent all of my souls. I have my ultimate, and so does Calico, whereas the Viscus does not have his ultimate. And I take a fight in this close quarters room. Even though I'm lower health than both of my enemies, I'm confident that I can win this fight if I can bait them into an all-in, because I'm as powerful as I can be with my souls spent, and I have an ult advantage. This fight ended up being close, but only because my Calico was very late for no good reason, considering we had already shoved the wave before engaging. That was done intentionally. My teammate almost let me down there, but in theory, that was a very good fight. You just have to be paying attention to see it. You have to be able to look deeper than just health bars, even though those of course matter. With these habits and mechanics established, let's now take a look at what you should be doing over the duration of the laning phase. These are the primary timers you should be aware of and consciously making decisions around. We'll discuss each of them individually. For the first 3 waves of the game, there are essentially no objectives in play on the map. Guardians start the match with 75% resistances, and over the course of 12 minutes, it decays down to a negative 50% resistance. Which means compared to the 12-minute mark, at the 2-minute mark, you do basically 0 damage to the towers. Which means there's nothing on the map to do other than fight the wave and fight your opponents. Unless you have a reason to believe that you are much weaker than your opponents due to your matchup, then you should err on the side of aggression. You should decisively take space. If you're playing a close quarters brawler character, consider rushing up and taking the veils in the middle of the map, and clear the minions as fast as possible so that you get wave priority and can begin fighting your opponents. After the first wave, unless you are denied, you will be able to purchase an 800 soul item. Unless you are actively shoving your enemies under tower and have the ability to continue poking them under their tower, it is likely best that you immediately return to your shop and buy an item. Otherwise, you're giving your opponents the ability to fight you with an item advantage on the second wave. That would happen since because you're shoving the wave into them, they're killing the wave while on top of their shop, meaning by the time the next wave comes in, they'll already be on top of their shop and have bought their item, whereas you will be over in their territory. Something to note about the first 3 waves is because there are effectively no objectives in play, if the enemies are stronger than you, there really isn't a downside to you taking an extremely defensive position and waiting. Wait to be healed by the incoming healing minions, wait to be able to purchase a healing item if you didn't do so at the start. They can't exploit your weakness by defeating your tower, taking your boxes, taking your camp. They don't exist. Just lose gracefully and wait for the objectives to spawn at the 2-minute mark. At the 2-minute mark, the stakes raise because now there are camps to be taken and boxes to be taken. The boxes spawn across nearly the entire map, but the camps spawn only in the blue lane and your team's left lane. What this means is the lanes are asymmetrical, as we'll discuss later, and there is a side that is favored because they have easier access to the tier 1 camp. Both teams want to be fighting for control of these camps and control of the boxes. As we discussed earlier, ultimately, the point of lane phase is to get souls. It matters much more than killing your opponents or even killing their tower. You want to be richer than your opponents. You can imagine a situation where two teams fight constantly in the green lane. No one ever secures a camp, no one ever hits a box. Whereas two teams in the blue lane never fight each other, and they diligently take both of their camps and run all their boxes. By the 8-minute mark, there might be a stale lane in both lanes. They'd be evenly matched, except the blue lane, they're each going to be 1,000 souls richer per player, which means they are going to have more influence to exert over the map to win the game throughout the mid-game. If you wanted to carry your game, you would want to be the blue laners in this case, not the green laners. Of course, I am not calling you to an extreme. I'm not trying to say you should ignore all fights in your lane in favor of just permanently running boxes and farming. Though of course, nor am I saying you should ignore your boxes and constantly permanently fight. I simply want you to understand that the theoretically optimal way to play Deadlock is to farm when the fighting is disadvantageous, and to fight when it is advantageous. And the skill of Deadlock, beyond the mechanical aspect, is being able to constantly make the right decisions about when you're weaker and such should farm, and when you're stronger and should fight. The next timer is of less importance, but it's worth understanding. If you secured a camp as soon as it spawned at the 2-minute mark, ideally about 5 seconds after it spawned, then it will be respawning at 3 minutes 30. This is especially important if you were able to steal the enemy camp, because you can very reliably predict that it will spawn 1 minute 25 seconds after you killed it. And so the enemies may not know that their camp is respawning at 3 minutes 30, but you will, and so you can try to actually steal it again instantly. The 4:30-minute timer is very important because it's what properly determines your ability to secure the bridge buffs. The bridge buffs spawn at the 5-minute mark, but putting yourself in a position where you can contest them without giving up resources is important, and it starts the entire wave before. The wave touches down at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's crucial if you want to carry your games and win your lanes that you contest the buff if possible, which means clearing that 4:30-minute wave as fast as possible. I should add here in this clip, even though I get to the bridge 10 seconds before the buffs spawn, I don't use my time to go run boxes like I would normally advise. This is because my blue lane has lost, which means there is a reasonably high chance their blue laners are going to rotate to our right buff. And I know I'm in a weak position, and if I'm challenged, I will probably die. And so instead of running boxes, which would generally be more efficient and is what I recommend, I had to take particular caution there to see if the enemies were contesting me. At the 6-minute mark, tier 2 camps spawned across the map. And now, with jungle camps having their health reduced by 30%, most characters in the game are actually reasonably able to clear these camps even at the 6-minute mark. This means that it's imperative to, after clearing the wave, contest your camps, or, if possible, because you're stronger, contest the enemy's camps. Previously, it was very hard for most characters to clear tier 2 camps, at least clear them in a single wave. They would take lots of damage, it would take too much time, and they would be contestable. Enemies could fight you if you tried. Now, with how quickly the camps can die, especially if you buy an item like monster rounds, making wise decisions about taking these camps is more important than ever. They can be stolen from you in a blink, but you can also secure your own camps in a blink. There's more skill expression now in fighting for your jungle early, and you need to take advantage of that, especially in lower elos where people are not as efficient with their time. The last major objective that spawns are the center sacrifices, or sometimes called vaults. These always take 300 damage to kill by way of melee. At the time that they spawn, they are worth by far the most amount of souls in the game for how long it takes to kill them, especially if you factor in the soul value of the golden statue buffs they give you if you defeat them with that well-timed heavy melee. Securing your vaults, or taking the enemy's vaults, is the quickest way to snowball in the lane phase outside of outright killing your opponents, which isn't always possible. If you are low elo, it is very likely that most of the vaults stay left on the map unsecured for several minutes. You need to be the difference. For example, in this clip here, I have a decisive lead over this Viscous and I've destroyed his Guardian. But instead of chasing after him looking for a kill after I clear his wave, I go straight to his vault and steal it, earning me an effectively 500 souls. Yes, I try to kill him after and I force out his ultimate, which is very good for me, but I didn't do that at first. I took the moment I had, since I have a complete combat advantage over him, to exploit his weakness and steal his camps. That was the first thing I did, because that gets me guaranteed value. Chasing after him doesn't get me guaranteed value. It's very likely he escapes. Maybe even his teammates try to gank me. But if I immediately go to secure his vault, that it has a much higher chance of being worth it, and it was. I now want to discuss some laning mechanics that are unique to Deadlock, primarily the functions of the healing minion and what you can do with it, as well as how the Guardians work. Ahead we can see a health pack. This is what drops on the ground after you kill a healing trooper, and has the same pickup radius as the soul orbs. That health pack heals you and your team, including your troopers, in a large radius around you. It's 16% of your missing health plus 150 HP, increasing by 4 flat HP per minute of the game. What this means is, the more damage you have taken, or the lower your health is, the more the health packs heal you. This has led most of the community to conclude that it is best to kill the healing trooper last when clearing a wave, since any damage you might have taken from the wave will then increase the amount of health you get back from the health pack, as opposed to if you were to pick it up first. The thing is I don't think it's that simple, because since it heals not just you and your ally, but also your trooper wave, the sooner you kill the trooper, the sooner you begin healing all of your own minions. The heal applies for players over the course of 2 seconds. It's relatively quick, but it applies over 8 seconds to your troopers, which means when you pick up a health pack, you essentially make your troopers unable to die to normal minion attacks, since they will be healing for more than the minions actually do to them in damage. What this means is, at the start of a wave, if you really want to secure a shove, it can be extremely advantageous to kill the healing minion first, since for the entire rest of the wave, essentially, while you're fighting it, your entire set of troopers, all 4 of them, assuming you kill the minion first, will be receiving healing. That technically increases the total health value of your wave, if you clear the healing trooper first, as opposed to last. Which means each wave, you have somewhat of a decision to make. Do you want to guarantee shove by killing that trooper, the healing trooper, as soon as possible so that your minions are healthy? Or do you want to prioritize fighting with your enemies and saving the trooper for last so that you can heal back up a little bit more? Again, it's just missing HP. The extra healing you're going to get from clearing it, if you've taken an extra 200 or 300 damage from the wave, is marginal. It's maybe 50 health at most, unless you took a significant amount of damage. Whereas if you clear the healing minion first, you have essentially guaranteed wave priority, especially if your opponents themselves are trying to kill your healing trooper last. Most players don't think of this interaction. It's one of the many examples of ways in which Deadlock's macro can continue to be pushed forward. If you're enjoying this video, consider booking a private coaching session. These are bespoke, tailored to the individual player and what they need and want. I've uploaded a few free sample sessions to the channel to see if it's something that you may be interested in. Link is in the description below. A quick note about Guardians. Guardians always aggro what's nearest to them with single target damage, unless you damage one of the enemy heroes. If you damage an enemy hero, the Guardian will switch its aggro to you immediately, and it will hold it until you completely leave its range. If you're trying to kill the Guardian as fast as possible, it is generally best to use a combination of heavy melees and parries. The Guardian constantly melees whatever is closest to it. However, if you parry it, it is stunned for 2 seconds. If you want to kill the Guardian as fast as possible, you can stay on top of it and continuously heavy melee, like this. However, it will re-aggro to you pretty quickly and do lots of damage to you, so I would only suggest doing this when the Guardian is very low on HP, and or you have to kill it very quickly, maybe with the help of an ally. Normally though, the most efficient way to do lots of damage to the Guardian without taking very much damage is to dash at it and parry, heavy melee, dash away and slide to extend the clip of your gun so that you can shoot it as many times as possible before having to reload. If you ever win a quick team fight in the lane and crash a wave and want to do some damage to the Guardian, that is almost certainly the best way to do it. For this next section, I want to take a look at character matchups. I want to look at character identities, generally dividing them into several categories, so that even in the future, once the meta has changed significantly, you will still be able to apply the concepts I discuss to make good decisions in your own games. In the background, I'm going to show some sample footage of box routes you can run, so that when you do decide to farm between waves, you can do so efficiently. Most characters in Deadlock share many similarities, so it's quite difficult to neatly put them into different categories, so bear with me here. I want to make an argument though, you can broadly classify most characters into one of these two buckets, that being a low cooldown fighter or a high cooldown fighter. Speaking very generally, the low cooldown fighters constantly have some kind of fight threat and presence, either because the cooldowns they do have are very low, or their gun or some other passive they have is always in effect, thereby making them always some kind of a threat in a fight. In contrast, the high cooldown fighters either have generally very long cooldowns across their whole kit, or perhaps they have one particular ability that makes their kit very strong that is itself on a high cooldown. Think a character like Eternus, where him having Flame Dash or not makes him significantly stronger, even though he always has the ability to proc Afterburn. Since Flame Dash is about a 40-second cooldown, that means you can reliably fight Eternus when you know he doesn't have Flame Dash. It is very important to think about the matchups you and your teammate have every single time you load into laning phase. If you are playing a high cooldown fighter, you do not want to be taking constant trades with your opponents, walking up too far, allowing them to engage on you when you don't have your cooldowns, or constantly taking gun duels. Imagine you're playing a character like Ivy with a generally low damage weapon that's also fairly close range. You would not want to be constantly taking a gun duel with the doorman across the lane. He has the advantage there. Sure, you might beat him mechanically sometimes, but he is at an inherent advantage over you, and you should at least be aware of that. As far as cooldowns are concerned though, think of a character like Calico. Her Gloom Bombs are on a sub 10-second cooldown for most of the laning phase, meaning if you're constantly peeking the Calico on roughly 10-second intervals, you're constantly giving the Calico an ability to hit you with her main poking tool. If you're playing a character like Wraith, where you are really only strong when you're all-inning people using your full auto skill, along with a whole group of cards you have probably collected by shooting the wave, you don't want to be constantly fighting that Calico. That Calico is going to win those exchanges if you are giving her the opportunity to constantly use her low CD against you. For some other examples, Mirage constantly has access to his Jin's Mark stacking ability, which helps him win long engagements. Abrams constantly has very high health regen, and so he wants to be using his gun to fight you constantly. Viper has a very strong weapon, and such if no one has any cooldowns, Viper wants to fight you. For the high cooldown fighters, Pocket really only wants to take quick engagements whenever he has his cloak and satchel. If he doesn't have those skills, he probably doesn't want to fight you. Billy is very strong when he has Blasted, but when he doesn't, his other skills are relatively weak. Dynamo's only real combat ability is his Stomp, and if you know he's run out of them, he's very exposed. Vindicta is relatively weak when she doesn't have access to her flight, which is also on a long cooldown. When you know she cannot fly, you want to fight the Vindicta. High CD or low CD fighters are not inherently strong or weak, and so understanding these things will be relevant regardless of patch and meta. For another category of characters though, we have the Sustainers. These are characters that have access to strong self-healing abilities. I don't mean the characters like Dynamo and McGinnis that can heal their allies, and here's why. You generally do not want to preferentially poke Sustainers. Because they have so much access to self-healing, they have more effective HP than non-Sustainers do, which means if you use your finite poking abilities to do something like 200 damage to an Abrams, Moe, or Victor, that is going to do significantly less damage to their overall health pool, as opposed to if you hit someone like a Paradox or a Holiday that don't have as much access to healing. Therefore, generally, when you have the ability, you should prioritize putting your poking abilities on the non-sustaining characters to put more pressure on your opponents. The Sustainers want you to attack them. Don't. The last categories I want to look at are these. The strong characters are characters I believe Valve wants to be inherently powerful in lane. Not necessarily OP in general, but at least strong in the lane phase. Mina has extremely high survivability, sustain, and poke, so all of her bases are covered. Geist has strong wave clear, sustain, and poke. Yamato also has good survivability, because her ultimate makes her CC immune. But she also has extremely powerful poke, both from her right clicks and her power slash. And lastly, she has extremely good counters to all-ins, because her third ability, Crimson Slash, if you put a single point in it, halves people's fire rates, meaning Yamato is rarely ever vulnerable. These last categories sort of go together. The roamers have very powerful abilities for roaming and ganking other lanes, which is something you should be strongly considering doing, especially if you're in the blue lane. Characters like Holiday and Grey Talon perhaps need their ultimates to be most effective for roaming, but these other characters have inherent tools in their first three abilities, which make them very good at ganking. If you're winning and you constantly have wave priority, consider instead of taking the enemy's camp or boxes, or perhaps if you've already done that, take the opportunity to quickly use a bounce pad and roam to another lane. You can very easily dive towers in Deadlock, and if you're healthy and or you have an ultimate, you can make quick work of other lanes, which, especially in solo queue, does pretty significant psychological damage to your opponents. One last thing to consider is that the wave clearers have very powerful wave clear, which means if you are playing with a wave clearer, you can take more time to run boxes between waves or gank other lanes. This is why the wave clearers in some ways have strong synergies with the roamers, because the wave clearers, by virtue of being able to protect the tower 1v2 with more ease, it buys the time for roamers to spend more time setting up perfect ganks in side lanes. It's something to consider, particularly if you're duoed. Deadlock's map is asymmetrical. Let's look at how. Every time you load into the game, from the perspective of your team, your left side lane is going to be the strong lane, and your right side lane is going to be the weak lane. So why? Well, it's strong because it has easy access to a tier 1 camp. The other side does not have this. They do not have a tier 1 camp, only tier 2 camps and vaults. This means is your strong side has, all else being equal, easier access to safely farmable souls, giving them item, ultimate, and other ability upgrade advantages. They also have a better defensive position by way of this Veil, giving them one-way poking access to be able to safely defend their tower if ever they get shoved in. They also have easier, safer access to their zipline. Because of this large structure here, if your strong lane ever wants to recall for any reason, it's very difficult for the enemies to actually hyperline them, shooting them off of their zip. Because for them to do that, they'd either have to already be standing on that bridge, which is unlikely, and expecting you to zipline out, or they have to be trying to fight you through your Veil to contest this back area, which of course, naturally, is an advantageous position for the defenders. So that's how they're strong defensively. Why are they strong offensively? Well, the strong side has access to this angle here. The Guardian is not standing in the way of the secret shop. So if you take this angle from the strong side, you have easy access to poking people on their secret shop without being punished by the Guardian. You also, even without taking Guardian aggro, have a completely open sightline to much of their zipline, meaning it's very difficult for the defending team on the weak side to actually return to base without being punished. They have and because of that, it just simply takes them longer because they must run most of the distance to their walker on foot. They also do not have access to a veil here, and so it's actually an even fight between the attackers fighting the defenders on their side, because this is just an open room. Unlike the other lanes, blue lane is symmetrical for both sides. It's nearly identical. However, there are some key features to note. Both sides have access to a tier 1 camp, and so there's always a question to be asked about whether you want to maybe press an advantage you have and invade the enemy tier 1 camp, or 50-50 it and just clear your own. But both sides have access to a veil protecting their tier 1 camp. But notably, unlike the side lanes, it's the one time you can actually access the secret shop and fight whoever is trying to shop here or hide without ever risking any kind of Guardian aggro. For all other sides of the map on the side lanes, if you ever want to invade the room that is by the secret shop, there's a brief moment where, when running into the room, you aggro the Guardian. That is not the case in blue lane, meaning you can pressure the enemies on their side much more easily than you could otherwise. Furthermore, both sides have high ground access, which of course can be good defensively, but it is a double-edged sword, because if you are being shoved in and the enemies take control of your roof, it means blue lane can be attacked effectively, even from high ground, from both sides of the lane without ever being under any kind of threat from the lane of Guardian. So blue lane is very punishing. If you're winning, you have many angles of attack on the enemies and can invade their camp. But if you are losing, the reverse is true. Something else to note is the blue lane has the shortest distance to getting back to base for healing. So it is always a decision to be made. If you are ever low, and for any reason able to get a quick shove on the enemies, it's much more practical for you to quickly, using a zip dash, return to base and heal between a single wave and hardly risk losing any souls from it. The weak side is always going to be your right side, for much of the same reasons we discussed for why the strong side is the strong side. They do not have tier 1 camp access. They do not have a one-way veil, so they can easily defend their tower and shoot minions under less pressure. And when they do have the advantage, they must fight the enemies without a proper cross angle on the shop, because if they ever try to pressure the shop, the Guardian aggroes them, and they also have a hard time actually seeing the shop. You see, most of my bullets are clipping the Guardian. They have a hard time shooting and using abilities on the shop because the Guardian stands directly in the way. And of course, when they try to take this angle, they expose themselves to the one-way veil. So, on the weaker side, your right side, you are poorer because you have less access to souls. You are under more pressure when the wave is shoving into you, and when you shove the wave out, you exert less pressure on your opponents. So it's both easier to lose and more difficult to win. One more thing I forgot to mention, the weak side has slower, access to the bridge buffs when they spawn, because the quickest way to access bridge buffs for either side is to take this bounce pad. The wall jump. You take the bounce pad straight toward the buff. Now, of course, that's more exposed and they have less cover when they do that, but it's much faster. The defending team, the weak side team, they have safer access because they, generally speaking, control this room. Of course, for the yellow side, it's this large open stone room, and you can run to the buff without exposing yourself to as many angles, but it's much slower. So in most cases, the strong side has easier access to the buffs. One final note I didn't mention earlier. The jungle is also asymmetrical, though it's identical for each side, so it's mirrored. For your weak side, your right side, you have less important jungle camps. You have only 2 Sinner Sacrifices, and you have fewer Tier 2 camps in general. You just have more access to larger Tier 3 camps in the back. But those are less relevant in the very early mid-game, around the 8 to 12 minute mark. You notably have access to your secret shop, though, which means even if you do lose your tower early, because that side is weaker and is more likely to lose its tower, it's not as damaging to your team's chances of victory, because you have still reasonably close, safe access to a shop. This is not the case for the strong side, though. The strong side has 4 Sinner Sacrifices. Between having the vaults that are close to each lane, they also have this double room, which is the room in the map with the most souls for how long it takes to clear, by far, at the 8-minute mark of the game. This really is the major objective on the map at the 8-minute mark, and both teams should be in a struggle to make sure they not just secure theirs, but secure the enemies too, if possible. So, for the strong side, that being the left side for whatever team you're on, you also have a more important set of jungle camps. More Tier 2s, which can be cleared by more heroes earlier in the game, more vaults, and no secret shop. If you lose your strong side tower, you are losing the strongest point of defense you have to being able to actually contest and secure your own jungle, and you also lose access to a shop on your side of the map. You would have to invade the enemy secret shop, which is riskier if you want to buy items. This is why it is extremely important that you do not lose your strong side tower. If everyone is playing the game correctly, losing your yellow tower is absolutely can be game deciding. Builds are extremely important in Deadlock, and so I want to say at the outset, it is extremely important that you, generally speaking, follow closely builds by known top streamers or pro players. There are many pitfalls to fall into in buying items, and I'll discuss some in a moment, and so if you want to avoid most of them automatically, follow builds by people you know and trust. Looking now, though, particularly at lane phase itemization. We see there are plenty of items in the game that are particularly good for lane phase. That could be because they have flat amounts, which are, of course, better earlier in the game. You can look at an item like Headshot Booster. It gives you a flat 45 damage increase on headshots on a timer. That is, of course, better in the early game when people have 600 HP, 800 HP. But it's worse later when people have 3,000. Items like Monster Rounds can be effective when you're being consistently shoved in, as this helps you contest a wave a bit better, keep it out of your face, so that you have more time to avoid poke from your enemies, but also go run boxes. These shielding items are situationally extremely powerful in lane, namely Reactive Barrier. There are some lanes in Deadlock where both characters have some way to proc this ability, and in that case, this is an extremely good item to buy. Items like Mystic Burst, though, for the same reason that Headshot Booster, have flat damage. This isn't very useful in the late game, but early game, it significantly increases your damage. Because Spirit scaling is flat, while gun damage scaling is multiplicative, even on characters that do most of their damage through gun, at least in the late game, it can still be optimal to buy items like Extra Spirit. These items don't just give you that flat 10 spirit power, but very often, especially if you don't invest in the full breakpoint, still gives you plus 7 for that first 800. It can be a significant increase to the damage of all of your abilities in the early game, even on gun characters. Moving on to the healing items. There are 5 major sources of healing items in Deadlock, and they're all situational. Melee Lifesteal is particularly effective on characters that have some way to proc it with an ability. You don't want an item like this when you can't proc it through an ability, because very often that's just telegraphing your melee to your opponents, and if they see that you have an item like Melee Lifesteal, they'll be more likely to parry you. Characters like Abrams, though, can guarantee it off a shoulder charge, and Billy and Calico can both guarantee it off of their melee skills. Mystic Regeneration is very good for characters that have constant spirit damage. Characters like Mirage can use this very effectively, because every time he shoots his gun, it applies a spirit damage proc when he activates it, which has a 0 cooldown. So Mirage can effectively constantly heal from Mystic Regeneration on multiple targets, so it's uniquely good on him. Resto Shot is very effective, particularly under 2 conditions. One, when you're fighting characters with a very large hitbox, think characters like Mo and Krill, Dynamo, Beep Bop. That way you can more readily guarantee hitting the healing proc on heroes, because as you can see, it procs for it far more healing on heroes than it does hitting NPCs. So if you're not able to consistently hit your shots, either because of just a general mechanical error, or because you're fighting very thin targets, think maybe Nina or Rem, perhaps don't go Resto Shot. For the 2 Vitality Resto items, there's something to consider. Extra regen is always proccing. It's always giving you 3 extra health regen. It's simple. It applies in combat. You don't have to think about it. But there's a unique benefit to Healing Right, which is that if you are using it essentially off of cooldown, it is giving you at least 5 health regen per second. Now, of course, the downside is it's not applying in combat, and it can also be cancelled early if you don't get the full channel off, and so this requires more intention and forethought. But if you are able to get these procs off, particularly do productive things while you're using the Healing Right, such as running boxes, then Healing Right can be much more effective than Extra Regen. Something to note about Extra Regen is that it builds into the item Healing Booster, which is a core item on many characters with lots of healing. That could be an instance in which you would want to build Extra Regen in lane regardless. But Healing Right, if you're not playing a character that wants to build Healing Booster, building Healing Right oftentimes can be more effective than Extra Regen if you use it intentionally. There are certain items in Deadlock that don't give flat increases to your damage. In fact, it's most of them. Items like a Lifesteal that heal you for a % of your outgoing damage, or items like Tank Buster that deal damage for a % of people's health. These items are more effective the longer the game goes on, because of course, an item like Heal Right is always going to heal you roughly 300 health, but Bullet Lifesteal on a camp is not going to heal you nearly as much per second in the early game when you're doing maybe 100 DPS, as opposed to late game where you're doing 500. So these items that give you % increases oftentimes are not optimal to buy during the laning phase. Of course, there are times where situationally they are correct, but generally speaking, in lane phase, you want to be buying a couple items, not your whole build. You don't want to sacrifice your mid-game power just to buy only items that help you in the lane phase. That's not worth it. But in most cases, you want to buy a couple items that help you, particularly in the lane phase. It could be an item like Mystic Burst, it could be Headshot Booster, it could be Monster Rounds if you're under pressure, and it's certainly almost always buying at least one healing item. Even if you are winning your lane, you're winning the fights, it is oftentimes optimal nonetheless to buy a healing item, as it increases the amount of HP you have. And if you are actually consistently winning fights with your opponents, that means whenever you trade your HP into theirs, you win, then you actually want to have more HP to continue funding those trades. If you want to constantly fight your opponents because you win those fights, well, buy a healing item so that you never have to release the pressure. Something to consider. Items like Slowing Hex as well, I should mention. This is an item that's very good for roaming. It's good generally for showing up to a fight that's happening elsewhere unexpectedly and assisting your teammates in a kill. Items like these are better in the mid game, and as such, generally speaking, you don't want to buy them in the early laning phase. Lastly, items like Rebuttal, and as I mentioned earlier, Healing Right. These items you need to be paying special attention to. Very often they'll be bought in the lane phase, and when your opponents buy them, it changes how you should play around them rather substantially. Rebuttal drastically lowers the parry cooldown, which means if you're playing a melee character, which is likely if the opponents bought Rebuttal into you, you need to be very careful about throwing out melees after their parry cooldown has reset. This item very often kills people just in a one single trade when they don't see it coming, even in Eternus 6. And Healing Right, of course, as I said earlier, it can be cancelled. This means when your opponents buy healing right, they're telling you they don't want to fight, at least when they're channeling it, which means very oftentimes you have an opportunity either to invade them in their jungle or their side of the shop and try to cancel their heal right, or by 2v1ing the teammate they have left behind. When people are using heal right, they don't want to fight, at least because they just don't want it to be cancelled. So you need to be paying attention to this so that when your opponents are using this, you make the correct decision in response. Right now in Deadlock, there are 4.8k investment breakpoints that significantly change how people itemize, particularly in the laning phase. As you can see the star for each of these investment categories. If you look, when you go from 3.2k souls invested to 4.8k, there is a significant increase in the amount that the stat is giving you. What this means is it's mathematically optimal in most cases to prioritize getting 4.8k investment spikes as soon as reasonably possible, because this is giving you more value for your souls than buying other items in general. So as you can see from most of these major builds by top pro players, very often you'll see, besides optional healing items, which they generally have when needed, they are investing 4.8k into gun or spirit very early. Mirage, 1600, 1600, 1600, that's 4.8k. Let's look at Shiv.
Time to kill some
monsters. Dude, rank 1 player, forever, in NA. He gets a healing item most games, some additional optional healing items, but gets 4.8k in spirit as early as possible. Let's look at Mina. Very strong early game character. Rushes 4.8k investment. Even right now, with the changes to green vitality, it can sometimes be good to invest in green items first. You see together, top EU pro rushes 4.8k greens very quickly. Many characters in Deadlock right now want to be investing in 4.8k.
Today's my chance to say thank you.
Pocket does the same. It's the most mathematically efficient way to spend your souls in the early game. And if you are doing this intentionally, and after hitting your 4.8k spike, getting very aggressive on the map, then you are very often going to overwhelm your opponents with a stat advantage. Again, as you can see from some of these builds, they don't necessarily go 4.8k souls as fast as possible. Doesn't mean they're always hitting it at the 5k soul mark. It's because very often there are items that are particularly good on your character that don't fit in with the 4.8k investment you want. Warden really likes having Quicksilver Reload on his grenade. Gives it extra damage on a very similar cooldown, but it also reloads his weapon, which he wants. Very often, you don't invest into the 4.8k immediately, but you can see in all of these builds that people are investing 4.8k souls into a particular stat by the time they're spending 10k souls. Doesn't matter what the build is or what the character is, because generally speaking, see this one does 4.8k first, and then it does gun immediately after. In most cases, you want to be getting it quickly, as fast as possible. Of course, possible being whatever is situationally reasonable. Maybe you're playing Mina and you want to get 4.8k spirit because that significantly increases your outgoing damage. That's very good. But if you get, if you have a matchup into two different characters that proc your reactive barrier, like maybe you're fighting a Beep Bop plus someone, reactive barrier could be very good because that's going to keep you alive. It's going to be uniquely effective in your lane, which again, any item that's uniquely, situationally effective is essentially giving you an abnormal amount of value per souls you're investing in it, which at the end of the day is what you're always wanting to do with your items. You are wanting to spend your souls efficiently, and you're wanting to farm souls efficiently. Efficiency is what Deadlock is all about. And so that applies to your item purchasing decisions just as much as it does to your base gameplay. There are many items in Deadlock that have cooldowns built into them, many of which you buy in laning phase, such as Resto Shot, Melee Lifesteal, the shielding items, Active Reload, and Headshot Booster. Each of these items has a unique cooldown the item is balanced around, And if you buy these items and you do not intentionally use them as often as possible, you are likely not getting your soul's value out of the item. An item like Headshot Booster has a 9-second cooldown. It means every 9 seconds you have that access to an additional 45 flat weapon damage. Even procs from a very far away range. This item you must be using as much as possible, intentionally. You cannot be building an item like Headshot Booster and then going for body shots on a player, or be focusing a minion when the player is right there without quickly popping them in the head first. You need to be doing things like that to get your money's worth out of these items. Resto Shot as well is almost more critical for this item to use it with intentionality, because it does less healing when you shoot minions and 0 healing if you miss. Whereas Headshot Booster only ever procs if you shoot an enemy in the head. Resto Shot goes on cooldown every 6 seconds whenever you fire your next bullet. Which means if you buy this item, you very intentionally need to make sure that more or less on a 6-second cooldown, you are shooting an enemy champion. If there is no enemy champion anywhere near you and you don't think you'll be near them for, well, around 6 seconds, go ahead and use it on a minion. But worst case scenario would be to just not pay attention to the item and very consistently, even when there are players around, shoot a minion or miss. You cannot be doing that. For the barrier items, these proc a temporary high health shield under certain conditions. For weapon and spirit shielding, it's when you take a lot of damage of the given type. For reactive barrier, it's when you get CC'd. These items give you an enormous amount of HP if you buy them early into the game. Haze at the start of the game has only about 700 health. It's more right now because of the extra items. Let's see. Yeah, 730 HP. If you buy this item as one of your first items in lane, and you get hooked by a beat bop, and it procs this barrier, it's probably not the time for you to run away. With a 325 temporary barrier, you need to put that barrier to use and actually begin to trade with your opponent. Very often when I'm coaching, I see players have their barriers procced by taking lots of damage or getting CC'd, and they panic and they run away. That effectively wastes the barrier. If someone gives you 300 health barrier that only lasts for 10 seconds, if you run away and you never take that damage, you've just wasted the barrier. If you actually instead, when you proc your barrier, intentionally or not, make sure that you fight to the point that you lose the 300 barrier, then you have fully utilized the item. For those of you that are still here, that are really genuinely interested in improving themselves in Deadlock, understand this. You will improve the fastest if you simply mentally apply yourself more. Every time you load into the game, pick an enemy ability to look at and try to remember its cooldown. Loading into a game against a Viscous? Okay, how long is this cube CD? How long is this splatter CD? When you're in the lane, wave to wave, be actively assessing if you think you're strong or not. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. That's okay. Eternus players are wrong too. It's just that you shouldn't err on the side of fighting all the time just to get better at fighting for fighting's sake. I think that can carry you to a point, but that's not the best way to improve. Deadlock is ultimately about decision making, and if your brain is turned off and you're just trying to slam your mechanics against the enemies and see who aims better, maybe who dashes better, that's not conducive to properly learning Deadlock. Deadlock's about much more than that. And so I am not suggesting you AFK farm boxes, and I'm not suggesting you AFK fight players. I want you to find a rational middle ground to occupy, and I think if you find it, it's going to greatly help you. For anyone that's made it this far, first of all, I hope you've enjoyed, and thank you. I've tried to make this video as comprehensive and helpful as reasonably possible, though admittedly, I could go on for much longer than the hour this video has already taken. It's a bit stressful talking about a certain point, knowing that I could add more nuance, I could take into consideration more caveats, but it would just make the video ultimately drag on too long for most people. If you're one of those unique people that really desires more, consider a private coaching session with me. I'd be able to most effectively assess what exactly you need the most in your gameplay and answer any questions you have, no matter how specific. I also prioritize answering the questions of my past coaching clients, as that's just reasonable, and I don't have infinite time. In any case, I hope this video has been helpful. Subscribe for more.